Yeah. So let's start. So initially, I just need to introduce myself, right? And then we will come back to the session that what is the significance of design patterns in Apex as well, right? Because in every high level language, there are some best practices that we are following while doing some programming, right? So if I talk to myself, right? So there are some of the sponsors of the this event, right? So that's one of the mandatory slides that we have to show here, right? So yeah, so I've been working in the IT industry for the last 15 years or so, right? And I've been since Salesforce for the last 10 years, right? So yeah, so I have like 20 Salesforce certifications with me, including system and application architect, and obviously it keeps going on, and I am at the moment on CT track as well, and try to get CT certified within a few, maybe few months or a year time, right? And at the moment I am working with one of the strategic partner of Salesforce Cognizant in the UK, right? And I have also mentioned some of my hobbies as well as well here, right? So yeah, so basically when we start uh, working on a technology, or you can say uh, uh, on a technology or on a high level language which help us to design systems, large enterprise systems, or any application, right? So there are some best practices that we need to follow, right? So obviously the leaders in the technology have come up with the best practices that if we want to solve any problem, or if you want to adopt any solution, there are some already built, uh, uh, you can say, architect level things that you can follow, and it will help you to resolve your problems, or it help you to actually uh, build the solutions which could be reliable, and which could be good enough for the people to use, right? And it should be has less bugs, right? So that's the uh, uh, basic idea to come up with the with some sort of basic best practices in the programming languages, which give you the framework, and based on those framework you can design your solution, right? So if you talk about the high level languages, we know, like there are many languages in the programming world which are there in the industry from the last 50 years or so, right? And the most famous ones are Java and .NET, right? So so the so the designers or the architects working the technology, they solve the problems, and they then come up with the idea that they should have some design patterns in the market which can help the new developers or the architects to use it, or maybe improve it or optimize it as well, right? So there are approximately 23 design patterns which leaders come with it, right? And there is a group of users, or you can say not the users, the group of architects, which we call as a gang of four, right? So that gang of four is basically the ones which actually come up with 23 design patterns, and they classify it into three different categories, right? So what are those categories, right? And what we are going to learn in this session as well, right? So basically, as I said, they are gang of four, which famously call as, which actually come with the idea that okay, they have to accumulate all those best practices or all those frameworks in a group, so that anyone who can start their journey as a as application developer or as an architect can go through it, and and make their life easy, right? So so basically is what we can call that, okay, like you have to develop or you have to implement new solutions, and it's not necessary that you can rely on it, right? You can improve it, or you can come up with the new framework if you if you see that okay, there is some gap in it, but they are the uh, well defined patterns already there in the market, and you can refer anytime when you are developing your solution. So there are some scenarios come into your life when you are solving any solution, any enterprise level solution, where you can say that okay, I can implement that design pattern if you already know about it, right? So obviously you have to first start learning it, that okay, what are those design patterns, and what are the basic background of those design patterns, right? So it's basically is always to adopt those things, right? It's not that you can just go read it and start implementing it, right? You have to understand the background, you have to understand the what are the basic logic, or what are the basic need of that design pattern, right? So basically, uh, as I said, that it's for the architects, or the for the leaders who actually working in this field for so many years, right? So their purpose is to improve the others' life, right? So that's what you can learn and what you can share with others, right? So it's basically help you to improve or speed your development process, as I mentioned in one of the 3 points, right? It also improves your code quality, right? If you know that okay, there is a specific framework that you can follow, how to write a piece of code, how to write a piece of class, how to integrate those things, then you can actually follow the uh, best practice, and in that way you can improve your code quality as well, right? So basically code quality is very important factor. You can write the code which doesn't mean any sense to your class, or to your any component that you are writing, right? So it should be well defined. It should be you can say have some meaning. It should not have number of lines which doesn't make any sense, and it's just increase your increase your code, and ultimately it will be burden for others to actually optimize those piece of code when you're not working on it, or when you are actually working on some other stuff, right? And also it also help to ease your code readability and understandability for others as well. If you follow the specific framework, they understand what piece of code, the piece of code that is written, what is the purpose of it, right? So there are other ways to actually help others to understand the piece of code. Uh, you can use the commercial net, but the way the way the code is structured, it helps to others to understand what that piece of code is written for, right? So that can help others to understand, if you're not around, that okay, what that piece of code or what that piece of class is actually written for, and how we can actually modify it, right? So I said there are 23 uh, design patterns, right? And it was actually classified into three different categories, right? So I didn't mention all those 23 design patterns here. I just picked a few of them, and the ones which are famous in the right? And then the structure pattern and the behavior pattern, right? So as their name suggested, you can feel that okay, what is the purpose? What would be the purpose of those design patterns, right? So so if we see in the creation pattern, right? So uh, so I have shown three design patterns under the creation pattern, which is basically one of the famous ones that we are usually using in our Apex code as well, right? So if you new to the Salesforce Apex programming, or a seasoned programmer, you know that okay, how we can actually using a singleton, right? So that's one of the important pattern that we are usually using it, and people are using it. Uh, but they don't know that they are actually using it, right? So I have obviously interact uh, uh, few of the developers, or while taking interview of the associates, I have actually intentionally asked those questions, right? That okay, they are something that you are doing in your Apex, and what is that particular thing, and how you're using it, and what is the name of that pattern, right? So they are using it. You can say, uh, nicely, and they know the purpose of it, but they don't know the name of this pattern, right? So that singleton pattern we usually use in our triggers, right? In Apex world, right, where we actually try to uh, where we actually try to achieve the functionality in which we don't want the trigger to be re-triggered again and again, right? So yeah, so in that we are actually using a singleton to make sure that if the trigger is run in the whole cycle, then it would not run again and again, and the recursive call should be avoided, right? So that is one of the important pattern that we are usually using it, but most of them were like the as I said that in my experience, people knows about that way of doing it, but they don't know the name of the singleton, right? So that's the important uh, pattern that we are using, right? Again, in the structure pattern, one of the famous pattern is adapter pattern, which we are using it a lot in Apex as well, right? Previously, when we are using the Visual Force pages things, in that when we are using any component which have the iterator, or we want to fetch the information from different objects, and then we need to show display all the information in a single page or in a single component. In that in that particular way of doing it, we usually use the wrapper classes, right? So that wrapper classes is actually the adapter design pattern that we use, right? So again, people using it, obviously they learn uh, with their colleagues, they learn using different resources in the web, but they actually don't know the name of that pattern that we are usually using it, right? Right. So that adapter is basically right. Similarly, in the behavior pattern, in which we can use these design patterns to achieve whatever we want to achieve, and the best way to achieve it, right? And obviously it depends that how you can use it in your solution, right? So they are the state design pattern. You can basic background of it, right? So if we move forward, then I just need to like show you that how the simple structure or the class diagram of the singleton pattern would look like, right? So as I said that we are usually using the singleton pattern in our Apex programming, usually in a trigger where we don't want to we where we avoid a trigger to be called recursively, right? So that's one of the pattern that we are using, right? So as it suggests that it ensure class to have only one instance, right? So when we obviously we can achieve it using the static variables, right? So usually what I have seen in my experience and working with different colleagues, that they are using the static variables, right? But they're not actually using it within a class framework. They're using within a same class and using and basically use the static variable and if it's true, then don't go through the code, right? But but the actual way to use it in a in a well-defined manner is to use a different class and then use that class instance in your code to make sure that that particular static variable that you're using as true and false, you can check it and then return the value from there, right? So basically, that's the basic purpose of the singleton, right? So it will give you the different point of view of a variable that the example that we can use in different domain as well is load balancing. If you want to check in the network that okay, how many instances of the computer are there in the networks, and you want to see their statuses in a one go, then you can use the load balancing, which you know that okay, what are the actual counts of it, and you don't want to reboot the same system, or you don't want to add the same network computer in your program, right? So that's how you maintain their their static values, right? Similarly, as I said, avoid recursive calls in our Apex triggers, and in a bigger larger system, we can also give the example of car parking registration, in which we have to make sure that okay, we actually uh, have a unique car registration in the system. We cannot have to a duplicate of it, right? And we can not have to have a you can say multiple. You can use those design patterns in those systems, and obviously it can be used in a different way, right? So this is a simple code snippet of it, right? So if you see on the left hand side, there is a class which is actually written as a program, and we have a main method in it, right? And in it we are using the singleton class instances, right? And we have a separate class for it which we call a singleton, and we are using the static variable there, right? So you can see that we have a separate class of singleton where we simply implement the singleton pattern, and see that if the instance is null, then just initiate that class. If not, then return it whatever the value is in it, right? And then we can on the left hand side, we just checking the instance, actually writing some commands on the console, right, to see that okay, if that instance is already there, or or the instance is already available. Yeah, so this is a simple code snippet that can we have for the singleton. Moving forward, just I just share my Chrome tabs, right? So let me go to the screen if you have anything to say here. All right, that's fine. Okay, yes. So moving forward, as I said, we have one of the famous design pattern that we are using a lot in the Apex programming as well, right? In Visual Force pages, or in a Lightning component as well, where we have to show data from different objects to in a single framework, or you can say in a single block. So we are using the wrapper classes within it, right? So the purpose of the wrapper classes is to basically allow the classes which are incompatible in a way that they have a different meaning, but you can use those objects or data of that object in a single in a you can say in a single framework, or in a single uh, 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 in a single you can say uh, block of code, right? Not a block of code, block of data, which in which you actually then uh, uh, show the data in any page or in any component, and then you can relay the data that okay, how the data can be visible, or how the data can be linked together. Right, so this is one of the class diagrams that you can see, that how we are using the adapter and adaptee, and how we can actually use the object of one class into another, and then we can use some of the key parameters, or you can say the key elements, which then link together, and then we can iterate the data from one key value to iterate the data from different objects as well, to actually show those way show to show that particular data in a way that we want to show, right? So so uh, in a simple way, when we are trying uh, to get the data from different object or different entities, and we don't have a presentation of it, then we use the wrapper classes in it to make sure that we have used the different orders in a accumulative way, and then we can iterate through it, right? So in that case, we have a multiple wrapper classes which are interlinked with each other, and then from the upper wrapper classes, we can then go and iterate to the child wrapper classes that we can have, right? So it's depending how complex your design is, right? And how complex, or how much, or you can say how how many objects data you can want to bring in a single in a sing in a single framework, or in a single uh, 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 piece in a single page, right? So that's how you can actually keep on adding your wrappers, but obviously there is some limit. You cannot go beyond it, right? So that's the basic understanding of the adapter design pattern that we have. Yeah, so basically, till now we learn about the importance of the design pattern, right? Why we are using it, and what we can achieve it, how it can save our time, how it will actually improve our code quality, how it actually helping us to resolve the already defined problems in the industry, and you can actually come across when you're designing some complex systems, right? But on the other side, there are some issues and criticism of the design patterns as well, right? So these criticism and design patterns also come from the leaders, right? That okay, how that is actually affecting, or sorry, impacting the way we are designing the system, right? So obviously, for every good thing there is an advantage that we can get from it, and there is some disadvantage as well, right? So we can go through go through those points quickly as well, to understand the overall picture of design patterns, that okay, when we are using it, how we can use, and how what are the things that we can avoid, and what are the pinpoints that we should have in our mind to use it, right? So obviously, it's not necessary that you have to actually follow the design patterns, or you have to actually follow a particular design pattern when you are resolving your solution. You can have a better idea. You have you can build a better framework, right? So it's come with your experience, that when you are working on a on a you can say on a technology, or working as a developer or a senior developer, based on your experience, then you can understand okay, how to design, or how to actually use the framework which actually benefit you, right? So yeah, so negative design issues, right? You can, like, you let's say you have a design pattern, and you are using, for example, a factory method, where you actually want to build your component, and it will be actually initiated from your parent child, right? But and you actually use it in your design, right? But somehow it gives you the impression that you can overuse it, right? Like, uh, you can use in a simpler way. You don't supposed to use a factory method, in which you don't have a complexity, in which you have a, like, you don't have a multiple components to be initiated to a single parent. You can design in a simple way, but when you use it, you realize that okay, you have to maintain that code, or you have to actually uh, dependency on that in a way that you cannot redesign, or you cannot actually modify it uh, based on your need, right? So in that way, you have a negative design issues coming through it, which is basically happens to the low coupling within your system, and you cannot uh, relate when you are actually moved to the or you actually when your system is going to be moved from a simple to complex, right? Similarly, when you start building some solution, and you think that okay, I can use the design pattern in a way that it suits my solving the problem, right? But it sometimes happens that you don't think uh, in a large like, you don't think for a for a broader for a broader version, and it comes to the conclusion that you use the wrong design pattern, right? So there are some design patterns which are very similar to it, right? The factory, and you can say uh, uh, there's a factory design pattern, and then we have a related to it another design pattern which is very similar to it, right? Which will basically we call it the composite, right? So we just need to understand okay, which correct design pattern we need to use, right? And obviously it will then uh, help to achieve or it will help to resolve the problem uh, easily, right? Rather than use the wrong design pattern, which basically ultimately complex your solution, and then you will be stuck in a way that okay, you might achieve something, but it's not optimized, or it's not helping you to go beyond that. Similarly, when we are using the design pattern, obviously one of the things that we are achieving that okay, we have a framework that we need to follow. We have a particular number of particular classes that we have to use, right? For example, for the wrapper classes, we have to have a design that okay, what would be the parent class and what would the child class, and what is the relation between it, right? So based on that, sometimes it can be uh, feel that okay, we are using or we are increasing the code complexity, right? We might don't need it, right? We can go with a simple approach, right? We don't have to have a multiple classes. We can achieve it with a single class, right? So it's a way you are actually thinking, right? Maybe that in complexity of code is basically helping you to uh, optimize your solution, but in a other way around, it's actually increase your code complexity in a way that okay, maybe other developers uh, would have a difficulty to understand that code, right? Because maybe they are the new developers. They don't know about the background of the design patterns, so they might struggle in understanding those code, right? So it's basically depending on how you actually how you actually you can say uh, 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 achieve it, or how you actually point to basically how you actually point to show to your to your team that okay, how do you actually using design patterns, right? And obviously sometimes it happens that you can use the same code in a multiple classes, right? And in a way that you feel that okay, this particular class could be optimized to single class, right? So that would be the issue that you might face when you are having when you are using the design patterns, right? So basically, uh, the way it should be worked, that it should have a clear mind, and should have a you should have a strong understanding of the design pattern, that okay, what that particular design pattern is meant for, and how we can use it for different solutions, or for our different problems, right? And I said there's a high similarity among the design patterns, right? There are some design patterns which are very similar to each other, but there are some minor differences in it. So we need to understand those differences. Obviously, it will not come easily. Like obviously, you have to have some experience using it, or you have to have a clear understanding. Obviously, it comes up with the experience, right? You cannot start understanding those smaller similarities in a one go, right? When obviously when you started your career, you have to have a see many uh, best practices that you need to follow, right? And in doing so, you can then know that okay, there are some design patterns that we can also follow, right? So based on that, based on your experience, then you have to then realize that okay, what are the best approach you can use it, and what is the best way you can utilize it, or maybe you don't even want to use it. You can have your own framework, you can design your own framework, which is basically more optimized, or basically a more uh, simpler. So these are the few of the issues of criticism that design pattern, like to use the design patterns, one can face it, right? So in the end, uh, uh, as I said, design patterns are not necessarily are not necessarily the best solutions that you can achieve, right? It's not necessary for your solution. It's not necessary that you can use it in your in designing your solution, right? You can use it, you can optimize it, you can also innovate some of the things, but they are the standards which are obviously established by the leaders of the technology, that they know that okay, what that they are some of the well-known defined problems in the industry that one can face it, right? So they can give you the framework and give you the ideas, okay, you can start using it, or you can use it to help you to resolve your problem easily or on a timely basis, right? But it's not necessary that that particular design pattern is usually meant for you, right? If you're working on a which have a different complexity, which have a different issues, and that is not being handled by those design patterns, then obviously you can come up with your own solution, or with your own uh, you can say uh, uh, framework of doing it, right? So that's the conclusion that we can learn from it. That okay, for every software engineer or software developers, as experience goes, you understand what are the basic issues that you can face in your daily life when you are working as a consultant or the or engineer to solve your issues or solve your or to actually resolve the problem that a client faces, right? So every industry have their own complexity. Based on that, you can use it. So that's it from my side. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Kiran is asking that what is the best design pattern that we can use, right? So the simple answer is that, Mal, that it depends on the your problem, right? If your org is complex enough, right, then you have to make sure that what are you trying to achieve in it, right? What are the different classes that you already have, right? So they are the so as example that I've shown you that the singleton is one of the simplest design pattern that we use in triggers, right? For example, if you have a complex org and in which you have a maybe let's say multiple triggers, right? And that org is not being used correctly or on an optimal multiple triggers of a single. So in that way, you then go with the so that okay, you should have one class which help you to uh, avoid the recursive calls, right? So it depends what problem you're trying to achieve here, right? So it's not like you can use all the design patterns or you can use depends that if you have some issues with your design approach, then you can refer to the design pattern. If that helps you to resolve it, then you can use it. If as I said, there are some issues for the particular industry that is not being addressed in the design pattern, then you come up with your own framework, right? So that's my uh, answer to your question, right? So it depends on the problem that you're trying to solve, right?